Ahoy there everyone, it's Don on FE7 and Mekkah.
Hello.
And you are watching Chapter 23 of my Fire Emblem 7 Hector Hard Mode 0% gross playthrough. It seems like just about every Fire Emblem game needs to have a desert chapter, and Chapter 23 is FE7's version of that. This is a memorable map for both casual players and LTCers alike, and for LTCers I can think of no less than 6 reasons why this chapter I think is one of the most difficult in the game. First of all, it's a route objective, so by default it's a little bit harder to LTC than most other map objectives. There's 2 bosses instead of 1, and in typical FE7 fashion, they're pretty tough. There's a fog of war that sets in on turn 1. Fortunately, we have the opportunity to at least scout the map beforehand, because a fog of war doesn't exist in this chapter by default, and on lower difficulties it's not there at all. And then there's desert terrain, which impedes the movement of all of our non-magic infantry. There is an XP requirement that we need to meet in order to get the paralog. We need to gain 700 total EXP amongst all of our player units. And finally, our deployment slots are really limited in this chapter. We can only deploy 7 units besides Hector. And for all these reasons combined, this is the first chapter in the game that we don't deploy Marcus. And without Marcus, things are a lot tougher.
Another thing that we don't have room with these constrained deployment slots is a Thief to pick up all the desert items that are also a traditional feature of desert maps. But fortunately there is another trick you can do to get them, and that is a desert item trick. We deploy with Lucius here. What we do is we reset the game and check a status screen, move him to a tile where we know an ocean seal can be found, and that way we have a 100% chance to pick it up regardless of the state of the RNG. This is better because that way we don't have to deploy a 3-move unit to get them. And the ocean seal is a pretty nice item to get. It is worth 25,000 gold when we sell it, which is a much better use than promoting Dart, who, as I said before, is not a very good unit in this playthrough. On this turn 1 enemy phase, what we're going to do is take on the first of the 2 warrior bosses in this map, and these guys are way stronger, more bulky, and more accurate than they have any right to be, which is why we have to set up Raven with that 4-use killing edge to get a double crit on him, just to make sure we do enough damage to him to actually finish him off next turn in an efficient fashion. The story of this map involves protecting Pent from, among others, these 2 bandit bosses as well as everyone else. But fortunately, Pent doesn't seem to need much protection. It's more like we have to protect them from Pent because he just massacres them all. This is good because it helps us complete the objective faster, but it's also bad because Pent is an NPC and he doesn't gain experience. So that means he makes it harder to reach the requirement for the guidance chapter. In addition, there is a small but existent chance that Pent just dies due to the whims of bad AI or bad RNG. For example, on turn 1, he gets attacked by 3 wyvern riders, and if all of them hit them, he just dies completely out of your control. But fortunately, that doesn't happen.
The remainder of our deployment choices are a result of compromising between trying to route the map and trying to maximize our EXP gain, both to meet the 700 EXP guidance requirement and also to get both Heath and Rath level 10. Heath starts off this chapter at level 7, so he still needs a lot of EXP to get there. We need to feed him a generic enemy kill plus 2 boss kills. Meanwhile, Rath starts at level 9, so he doesn't have any trouble getting there, but the unfortunate thing is that we have to deploy Rath to help route a chapter, and trying to use a 2-range lock unit to do that definitely doesn't sound intuitive. But fortunately, on the first turn, he's able to 1-round an Armor Knight with a Brave Bow with all 4 hits, and on the subsequent few turns, he has a couple of setups where he can counter an enemy Archer or a Nomad and 1-round them with a Brave Bow. At the beginning of this turn, another NPC unit joins. This is Hawkeye. Like Pent, he also doesn't require any protection from the enemies. We manipulated his starting position a little bit by placing Ninian in the tile that he would have normally appeared in. This causes him to be a little bit further up and a little bit closer to the edge of the desert, so he's not as impeded. You might think that we're going to try to have him reinforce Raven, because Raven was having a lot of trouble just dealing with one boss, so who knows how he's going to do against the other. But the problem is that Hawkeye has a couple of significant drawbacks. First of all, he's kind of slow, and we'll see that come into play in the next chapter. But his other problem is that he has a big fat 16 constitution, which means that it's really hard to get him to move around faster than his innate pace of just walking around. It means that we have to deploy units like unpromoted Florina, and we just don't have enough units to like take him and drop him and actually advance in the chapter. So overall it's better for him just to help reinforce Rath and compensate for the lack of 1 range.
Fortunately, we've set up Raven in such a way that he can take care of the next boss without any help from Hawkeye, by using the 2-use killing edge. This boss has both a steel axe and a hand axe, but for some reason he prioritizes using the steel axe against Raven, which both allows him to counter with a stronger weapon compared to the hand axe, and it also allows him to double attack, whereas otherwise the boss wouldn't be weighed down enough for him to do that. The reason this boss attacked him at close range with the steel axe is because the boss thinks that Raven doesn't counter since his weapon will break during this round of combat, and as a result we get to put the boss down to a lot lower HP and feed him to Heath in a little bit. One of the compromises that we have struck to help route the chapter and get enough XP is use Lucius. He dodged a hammer with about 30 hit on him and got a bit of chip damage on that. Don seemingly forgot that Lucius existed throughout this whole playthrough ever since he was first recruited. We deliberately left out Lucius from previous chapters just to make sure he would be a lower level for this one. That way it's easier to reach the guiding requirement because at a lower level you gain more XP, and for instance here he gains 50 XP for each one he gets.
Someone whom deployed and is instrumental for routing this chapter, which we haven't talked about yet, is Canas, who is on a solo mission to the bottom left corner of the map. He's also going to find the body ring on this player phase, where we have to employ a second variation of the desert item trick, because Canas has to attack an enemy, so we can't use a method where you just view the status screen once. This time he has to bring up either the weapon select window or the item use window 8 times before committing to a round of combat. He attacked the enemy with Nosferatu for a chance to regain some HP, because otherwise he doesn't have a chance to use a healing item on this turn. But Nosferatu weighs him down so much that he's not going to have a good enemy phase with it. So picking up the body ring allows Canas to send the Nosferatu back to the convoy and queue up the Flux Tome. Magic users are really good in this chapter if you have one that's trained, and Canas demonstrates that, but in 0% growth, because he only has 10 magic, the enemies have a chance to have too much HP or resistance for him to cleanly 2-hit KO with Flux, because we saw that in the first enemy phase. So we had to RNG manipulate slightly to have one of the reinforcement wyvern riders have below average stats.
So Fiora's combat isn't nearly as good as Canas's, but at least she has enough mobility to pull off the last variation of the desert item trick, and we're going to use it to pick up 2 items at once. First one is to fill us might, and we go onto the tile after viewing the item screen 8 times, and we use a vulnerary to activate Canto so we can move 1 up, and also pick up the Eclipse after checking her status screen 2 more times. We use a vulnerary here to activate this trick, but if we didn't take any damage with Fiora, we could use a torch instead. These 2 items are the last desert items that we pick up. There are 2 more in the upper left corner where Pent is, but in the low turn count playthrough it's not feasible to get them. They are a light brand and a hero crest. And we also let go of a white gem that could have been stolen from Jasmine, as well as a guiding ring that could have been stolen from a mage that Fiora killed. But this is FE7, and more than ever, money doesn't matter.
As is typical for a route map, we're going to try to end on enemy phase. Pent's going to clean up the last Wyvern Rider reinforcement in the top left, and we're going to rely on Hawkeye to kill the last 2 Cavaliers in the top right. He's not fast enough to double them because they have steel swords, and he also has up a triangle disadvantage, so we have to rely on a Killer Axe crit. After everything is wrapped up in 3 turns, Mekkah, how much EXP have we gained?
Looks like we have 717 EXP.
Alright, so see you on chapter 23X.
Bye.